Oh my gosh! I just stopped the music.
I was like, that was really soft.
I know it was like abrupt.
I mean, abrupt.
That was my fault. I pressed the wrong button. Oh my gosh!
Like that game where you what's it called? Freeze frame?
Yeah.
Or freeze dance?
Or it's like, what was that game where the chairs with
musical chairs.
Musical chairs, and you're like, I gotta stop, or you gotta get the chair. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
As a kid, I remember when he would get down to that one chair, and then people, and you know what? I've seen adults get crazier than kids.
Oh yeah, pushing people off the chair and
freaking cakewalk. Have you seen that one?
Oh my gosh, I haven't done a cakewalk in forever. That takes me way back.
The things people will do for the freaking chocolate bundt cake. Push people off that last chair. I'm like, okay,
make your own bundt cake. It's okay.
Relax yourself.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. I love that. The bundt cake. Okay, we're up to our antics again. So sorry about that, folks. I abruptly stopped the music, but welcome to the Emotional Entrepreneur Show. We're always so happy to be here with you. And this is Summer, and that Jen. You're going to do your hi? Hi, I'm Jen. Oh my goodness. Hello, everybody. Welcome. And so today we're going to be talking about cultivating understanding through mentorship by recognizing value differences. And man, oh man, oh man, there are so many things that we could talk about here, because when we look at the different generations from traditionalists to generational, is it generational alpha? Is that the last one? So there's just so much we could say. However, what I will say is, are we making assumptions, right? Mm-hmm. Or are we making these general statements just based on observations, based on studies that have been done, based on, but those are generalizations, right? And so what we need to do is, as we are trying to understand values, is actually ask questions, understand, the people that you're working with, who's around you. If you are a mentor, here's the thing. As we talk about mentorship, we're talking about cross-generational mentorship. This is something that Jen and I and our team here at Core Women, the Emotional Entrepreneur, really, really want to talk about, want to change the scope of the way that mentorship looks, really understanding like how we're going to shift the culture a little bit as we understand one another in the workplace, especially when we do have, generally speaking, I'm not talking about the subcomponents of the generations, but 6 generations out there that we need to really concentrate on in relation to who's going to be or who is in the workplace right now. Jen?
Yeah, I think the word that stood out for me that you mentioned is assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
The stereotypes and the assumptions that, we come with our biases, we come with our experiences, we come with, just what we've gone through in life with different people of all ages. And so those assumptions come with us. And then how do we take them with us into the workplace? And how does that affect how we think and interact with the other people and our colleagues? And so I think this is going to be an interesting conversation because, I over the years have thought about like, we think about the things that we say about like baby boomers. I think about my own parents, like how slow they're moving. And then I think about my son who was, Generation Alpha. And totally different, right? It's so funny. And that's why you see these reels and these memes and you laugh at them, because they are all encompassing and summarizing our life experiences with people of different generations and these categories. But, it's funny, but there's also a moment where we have to appreciate, and that's what we're talking about here. Like, where do you recognize the value that each generation brings? And then, on top of that, how do you have some compassion and understanding so that, we have understanding of where's the other person coming from? What are they dealing with? And what did they grow up with? And how is
Yeah.
this helping us and affect us in the workforce?
I love that you said compassion, but I I love that word. I love the whole idea of it. I love the theoretical and the practical premise of it. But I will say this, that if we don't have an understanding, this is just my own, perspective, if we don't have an understanding of others, of the other, right? Then how are we going to have that compassion,
You're not. You're not. Yeah,
right?
you need the understanding. It has to that
Yeah.
that has to be there.
And that's why we talk about these things. We talk about understanding values and priorities. And you know, it's not just goals, because goals, we all have goals, but what are our values? What do we believe in? And on top of that, what are our priorities about those values? How do we prioritize those values? Whether it's work, where we live, how we live, what we want to buy, what purchases we make, like to our finances. I mean, there's our religion, our spirituality, all of those things. And then and we become, as a society, very complicated because we all have different values. However, I will say this as well. When we break it down into the emotions, right? What we talk about here, we all experience those, whether it be sadness, joy, whether it be fear, whether it be courage. We all have those things in common, right? Those are just a given. So there's never been a time where I've assessed people where they haven't experienced some range of emotion outside of maybe those with different personality types. And we won't go into that. That is a different conversation altogether. So, um, yes. So I think when we talk about cultivating understanding through mentorship, we're really talking about cross generational mentorship. That's what we're talking about here, anyway. And that's why it's so important for us to really address this, because we're not talking about reverse mentorship. We're not talking about your traditional mentorship where somebody who is older is mentoring. That's the person to only mentor somebody who might be younger, right? We are talking about shared knowledge across the generations. And to do that, we do have to have some empathy, some compassion, some understanding to begin to have that empathy. Jen?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely spot on about excuse me, the understanding. And it makes me wonder, if you are in a company or a workplace, what steps are being taken to, shorten that gap or to
Yeah.
bridge that gap, I should say, because, the few times I've worked with other people, especially of different ages and different generations, I remember just like you just had to figure it out yourself. You had to, you had to understand that how that other person thought and what they think and how they do things. That and sometimes it's not even a generational thing because you sometimes experience that with even somebody of that's your same age, and so
Yeah.
it's I think it's amplified when there is now there's a generation gap on top of trying to even just get along with another person, right? So
Right.
it's just like, I'm thinking like, man, when I was in a work environment, they didn't provide any training. They don't I didn't not from my experience. So it's like you're kind of just left to figure it out. And then I think about those times when it was difficult. And I don't like it when I didn't have any resources and then you just almost it really affects your experience, you and some people have it worse, right? Where it's to the point where you really don't want to see that person. You hate that you just start to hate coming into work because the culture is, it's not conducive to helping people thrive. And it's like there's always like some kind of conflict. So it's like, what are companies doing to help alleviate that cringiness for people to like, why would you want your people to come into a work environment they're not happy to walk into? And so what are companies doing to ease that? and to help their employees and equip them with the tools or resources that they need in order to, I don't want to just say get along, but how do you make it so it's like this, this wonderful cultural environment where people are thriving, people are learning how to communicate with one another, coming in with that understanding and developing that compassion.
You know, there's so many things that you said there, Jen, and I want to read a couple of comments right now. So Bibiana said, um, lately I've been getting flack for being Gen X, and it makes me laugh because they are talking about the people I didn't hang out with, not me. And then Bibiana says, I bond with Gen Z and Gen Alpha through music. So I love that she mentioned that as well, because what's so important here is understanding, right? And we get to empathy when we understand each other, when we start talking about what it is that we value, what our priorities are. Because and I really appreciate what you said, Jen, about what are companies doing about creating these environments that are bridging the gap through these generations. We've got essentially 5 generations out there working. You might add Gen Alpha in there because we're trying to get ready. We're trying to prepare for Gen Alpha. And we do have some Gen Alpha out there that are doing YouTube, or they're doing TikTok, or they're doing other things that are essentially making money. And they might be working more autonomously, but they also have a set of priorities and values. Whether or not those are fully formed yet, we don't know, because, as we grow, we become stronger in what we prioritize and what we value, because we have a better understanding of oneself, right? And so it's not just the conditioning that we've been exposed to. So whether or not that's a parent, a clergy member, an educator, or an educational system, or whatever the case may be, we might have been told, it's important to believe A, B, or C. But once you step outside of that and you look within yourself and say, what do I truly believe in? What are my priorities here based on my beliefs, right? Then you can get a better understanding of self. And so we have that going into companies, into workplaces where people are still either trying to figure out their own values, or they have, right? And there's some confusion there too, even with maybe the company's culture and their values. So if the company hasn't figured out what their own values are, it's going to confuse your workforce. It's going to confuse what your priorities are, what your strategy is, right? But more so, your values or priorities lead you in many different directions, whether it's your marketing, how you're talking to your consumer, how you're connecting with your community, all these various things. But then you have your community within, right? Your workforce. And so what we're talking about here today too is, how are we cultivating understanding through mentorship within a company? Well, you can't necessarily do that if your own values as a company are confusing. You don't know what your priorities are. You don't know what your message is to either your employees or those people that you're trying, your consumers, right? So what is important is that somehow you figure these things out and understand that what are my values? What are my values as a company? And then as we talk about mentorship, the mentors themselves will have their own set of priorities and values. So how are they not imposing those priorities or values onto those others of different generations?
Right.
And so that's where we begin to have those conversations. That's where we begin as companies to set up these new cultures, this cross-generational mentorship and leadership, where we can have these conversations. We can make it a better place to understand, to work in, where we're really breaking down those silos, where we are helping people and supporting them so they don't build this imposter syndrome within, that they have a better chance of communicating effectively with others because there's trust being established there. So there's all these different variables that you can think about when we start integrating a mentorship program, especially a cross-generational mentorship program, as to how are we going to build up communication? How are we going to break down these barriers? How are we going to break down the silos? How are we going to build up trust? So, and how are we going to bridge these gaps between the generations when we are making assumptions or not making assumptions, and whether or not we're getting to know somebody or our workforce better as a team, as a community? Jen?
Yeah. I'm going to read what Bibiana added. She said, it's hard sometimes to understand where people in a different generation are coming from. Being respectful and trying to get their point of view is a really good start. Yeah, I think that's wonderful. And that's where I think is a good start. It's trying to understand, where are you coming from, and then being respectful because I remember when back in the back in the day, I act like it's 50 years ago, during the mortgage crisis, during the mortgage crisis of 2008, when I was trying to figure out like, well, before the whole real estate market just exploded, exploded and then imploded. I remember, there were like different mortgage strategies about paying the house down, don't do it, all that. That's a whole different topic. But, one of the things that we were studying in the office was like, well, why do the older generation want to pay the house down? And, then it went back into the whole story of like, we'll think about the Great Depression when the loans were called and they had to pay the loans, immediately. And so those people, that generation went through, their own financial trauma. So of course that mindset set in, and then it carried on. And then what happens with, generational things, it gets passed down. So then, you pass that on to your kids, and then those kids become adults, and then they pass that on to their kids. And so, you get to, three generations down. And so you wonder like, well, why is there that theory, or why is there that idea? And so that's an example of like, depending on what era you grew up in and what was happening at that time in history and how that affects you is going to affect how you make decisions. And that could be financial, that could be, anything that somebody's going through. But it's having that understanding, like, what did you go through when you were growing up? What did you inherit? It almost, it's almost like money mindset too. It's like, what did you inherit as you were growing up? What did you hear from your parents? And so obviously we have younger generations. We got millennials, and then now we have Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and it's a whole different thing. They don't they grew up with technology. So there's all these different things that affect them. They're experiencing life in such a different way. So having that perspective is really, really key. And the thing that I think is really unique to how we're approaching this is that you said it so many times that, yeah, this is not reverse mentorship. This is about everybody having the opportunity to share so that there is an understanding of where people are coming from. So, yeah, because I mean, even when I'm dealing with, my son who's 13, I can't believe he's a teenager now. Yeah, and, he actually does some work for me, and I'm thinking too, like, well, if you ever work for somebody else, how are his communication skills? How is he going to be able to communicate with an older, somebody in an older generation if it's not me? And it's different because I'm his mom. But what about when he goes out there and he's interacting with other people? Is he going to just be that one word person like, okay, or my goodness, this is what I deal with. Like I said, and I've seen reels on this that are so funny. Like you send like this whole paragraph and, oh, I'm so proud of you, I love you, and then it's like nothing. Or, okay, and it's just like you look at it, you're like, "That's it? That's all you got to but that's how they are." So, I don't think it means that they don't care, but it's just so funny because we as an older generation are used to, a certain kind of communication, and then and here's the thing, we can easily interpret that differently, or it could be off-putting when that might not be the very case. It's just that's just how they learn how to communicate. It's like one word or no words. So,
Yeah.
how does that kind of thing affect your work flow and trying to work on projects together? It's those kind of little things where we can again not only have our existing assumptions, but then what are the assumptions that we start to form and build like, oh my gosh, that person sucks. Like they don't even tell me, they don't even confirm. And that person may totally not even think that they're doing anything wrong. They're just probably like think like, okay, cool. I got the assignment. I'm already off and doing it. And meanwhile,
Yeah.
you're over there thinking like they don't even want to acknowledge it. So there's all this misunderstanding and miscommunication. And if we just create an environment or something that just brings people together to, smooth over and alleviate any, misunderstanding, I can totally see it where it's just like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know you needed me to confirm. Oh, yeah, I'm already almost done with that. I was gonna send it to you this afternoon." I mean, it could be something so stupid and simple.
Yeah. Yeah. But you know what, Jen? It's not stupid because here's the thing. When I was doing assessments and I was working in hospitals, we would look at how people would communicate. It would give us a better idea. So when you get that long text or that long email, sometimes I'm like, "Oh my God, why are those people being so circumstantial?" Right? Like, and circumstantial means when you're taking them basically around the world and back, right? So you start here and you go here, 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 here. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, okay, we can be a little bit more linear here," right? And like get to the point. And I think that when we're like that, and I do that too, I can tell you, I do that to my mom sometimes because I'm like, "Mom, I love you. Oh my God, this is like," and then maybe it's because I don't have time, right? And I'm like, then I feel bad. And I
Well,
start like,
because you're an
"Oh,"
Aries and we're impatient. Could be that too.
and then, however, I'll tell you, when I'm shopping, I can get a bit tangential. So rather than going through the mall this way and this way, I'm like, boom, 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 boom,
Oh,
boom,
no.
right? So, so,
Not
but then
me.
there's times where I'm like, okay, I got to get in that grocery store. I know exactly what I'm going to get. Everybody out of the way, right? So, and it's like, I get that. I get that where it's social, it's communication, it's experience, it's what's influenced us, it's implications of that influence, right? And so it's those historical implications like you were talking about, what's impacted us over the years, maybe some trauma because of those experiences. So, yes, to better understand that, we need to start having those conversations. But again, to those communities, to those businesses out there, how are you setting the stage of the foundation for those conversations to happen? Where are you setting and rooting trust, right? Because if you're unaware of your own principles or values or beliefs and priorities, it's going to confuse those coming into what you've developed or what you've created as a business, right? So where is the guidance there? Where's the guidance for the company? Where's the guidance for the employee to actually feel like they can have those conversations, right? And so especially as we're setting up a mentorship program with a company, these are the things we're talking about because I've made this example before, and you've heard it, Jen. Some of you out there might have heard it before, but here's the thing: as I was working in mental health, somebody might come up to me and say, "Hey, listen, I just know my kid has ADHD. I know it. I know it. I know it because this kid over there, he's been diagnosed with ADHD, and my kid has the same symptoms." And I'm like, "Woo, okay, wait. Let's hold on. I'm not trying to minimize what they're saying, but at the same time, we need to give a fair chance to every human being, right?" So I'm like, okay, let's take a look at this. Let's actually understand how your child is functioning, because it may be unbeknownst to that person or even that family member that this kid could be suffering from a ear infection, and they could be all over the place. They could be jumping and like unable to focus or unable to pay attention or unable to do their work because they're uncomfortable. They don't feel good, but they're not able to express what's going on. So until we do that assessment, I don't jump to any conclusions about yes, that person has that diagnosis. No. So we do that evaluation, right? And then we come up with a better understanding of, okay, this is happening to this child, or this is what this child is going through. And then on top of that, that parent might say, "But I think they just need medication." That's what I think.
Hmm.
And I'm like, until we do that evaluation, that's not something I would recommend, right? And if that comes out to, okay, that child might benefit from that, that does not go without some socialization, some leadership, as a community of businesses, it would be leadership. But for that child, it might be behavior modification, which again correlates to leadership. How are you modifying? How are you understanding your behavior as a company, right? So even if you have, let's say, this mentorship program, it doesn't go without the leadership training. And so that's my correlation is even if this child has been diagnosed with such and such, maybe is on that medication, I always believed that behavior modification or behavior coaching or counseling always supported that child in a really helpful way. And
Right.
so, and it got that child a lot further because guess what? They're able to better function in community, better able to communicate what they want or don't want or what's working for them, better able to communicate that their ear is hurting, better able to communicate A, B, or C. And so that again helps support, if we're going to transition that into a business profile, that would help a company do the same things. Better communicator, being able to transition maybe their hybrid programs into on-site programs, maybe being able to transition from, okay, everybody work remotely, but they're now coming back into the office, which, wasn't it Amazon that did that like about a month ago? So it's like, how are these people helping their communities transition and how are they helping them through cross-generational mentorship?
Right. I'm gonna mention some stuff that Bibiana said. She said
Right.
when they used horse and buggies, this probably referring to the Great Depression era.
Oh my
And flip
gosh.
phones were on Star Trek, yes. And then she said,
Seriously.
I'm fine with that short answer, but I like when you ask a question or need an answer, you have to take a deep breath because it can be so frustrating. Yeah, it can be because you're just like, "Okay, and what else? Is that all you're gonna say?" And then we're left with that and that's the thing, right? It's like, I think a huge part of this is also understanding, the communication style.
Yeah.
How do you want to receive information? How do you like that delivered? How do you, give feedback or even just sometimes for me, it's just like, give me basic confirmation. Did you get it? Do you understand what I asked for? Are you good with this? Do you have any questions? But when it's like nothing, I'm left with this like, hello, what's going on? And then I'm frustrated when I have to reach out. Like,
Yeah.
hey, do you have any questions? Like, hey, did you get it? Hey, I just check it. It's like for me, I feel like I shouldn't have to do that. There
Yeah.
because I do that for somebody else. Hey, just letting you know I got this. Hey, I got it. I don't have any questions. If I do, I'll make sure I reach out. But again, I don't know. It's just again, there's we all grew up differently. We all have different work experiences, all the things, but that's where that breakdown can happen and create a frustrating work environment. What else did she say?
I
But
like
I
what
think
she's,
oh, go
yeah.
ahead.
Go ahead. I like what she said here. I say this coming from a generation raised by people who didn't communicate. So we're back to that's it, just not passive aggressive. It's just zero.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And then can you imagine if we're somebody that doesn't know how to just stop and assess, like, what could possibly be going here instead of rather than just going automatically, our assumptions.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that could happen, right? So that can create even more frustration. And then the other person can, then they're acting to our passive aggressiveness if we're not communicating. I mean, it can just keep going back and forth.
Yeah.
She said, right? Maybe they've all been up night watching rocket videos on YouTube and need more sleep. Yeah, that's so crazy to me, Summer, when you're talking about your experience when you were working in mental health. It's like, I can't believe there's these people that like you're the professional and then they're trying to tell you what the diagnosis is and telling you what they think is happening. I'm like, then why are you here? Why are you here? Like, apparently you became a doctor overnight and so why are you here?
Oh my gosh. But here's the thing. We can ask questions, right? And I appreciate this conversation so much because we do. We all come from different backgrounds. We all communicate differently. Bibiana says maybe it's because we need enough sleep and we didn't get enough sleep. So we're responding in a certain way. Maybe it's because, that's the conditioning where she said, I was raised with people who didn't talk. And, I listened to songs. One of my favorite songs was Boys Don't Cry by The Cure. And, I think he was actually even though the words were boys don't cry, I think he was saying the reverse. We actually do cry, and yet we're told not to show it, right? And so there's that type of conditioning. So it might seem that we're rigid or hard when we're trying to communicate or trying to get on to the next step. But again, the conditioning was we don't talk about it, we just move on, right? And yet we have these different generations, let's say maybe millennials or Gen Zs were raised differently, right? Where we came up with these terms, the helicopter parent or snowplow parent, because they would rush in and they would pick up these kids if they were to fall, right? And so that's where those terms came in because maybe our generation, Jen, we were looking at this, we were like, well, our parents just let us fall and get back up. We didn't have these snowplow parents to pick us up and go, oh, you know what? It's okay, right? You'll be okay and we'll get you through this. And then those people are talking to the teachers. And what was it? It was up to us to talk to our teacher. It was up to us to figure things out, right? So we're coming from different perspectives, from different experiences, from different, I guess, values, because based on that conditioning, based on those experiences, based on those habits, our expectations start to be different as well. And so that's where it's important for us to have these conversations so we could better understand where we're coming from, what our conditioning was, what our values are, to create better spaces for conversation, communication, to really help build these communities and connect communities in a way that it's healthier. There's wellness within those communities. Jen?
Yeah. No, I think that's spot on. Yeah, it's just so interesting to see how the differences can have a negative can have a negative impact on the company culture and on the employees if there isn't there isn't something that's provided to them to help us understand each other and
Yeah.
how we're communicating. Because at the end of the day, when I think about, when I used to work in an office, I I'm really huge on, like, feeling good and being happy in my work environment, and when it's crappy and I'm not getting along with other people, or they have their hangups and it just for whatever reason, they probably are dealing with something. But when it affects their communication, when it affects the way they interact with me, and I'm just trying to do my thing, and I do wanna get along with everybody because I'm there most of my day. When the last time I had, a job and I had to work in an office, I'm there. Most of us, when you are working, in a certain environment, you're there for a good chunk of your day. So why would you want to spend a majority of your day just hoping, I can't wait till this is done. I can't wait till I can go home. Like that's so coping,
Yeah.
and I think that's why it's important for companies to pay attention to, like, are you taking care of your people? Because if retention and not wasting money is important to you, then taking care of your people should be something you pay attention to.
Absolutely, because retention, if you can't retain those employees, or if they don't have an opportunity to grow or to communicate or to flourish, guess what? They're going to leave. And guess what? That's going to raise your costs because you're going to have to retrain, send them through, HR. You're going to have to, and it's hours and hours of doing this potentially. And guess what? You've lost a ton of money.
Oh yeah, trust. If you are not making your people happy, they're on Indeed.
Yeah.
They are brushing up their resume, and you know what? I know because I did it. I did
Right.
it within 2 months. I was already over it, and I'm just like, "This sucks." Like, I'm not
Yeah.
happy. They're not doing anything. It's just like you can't expect people to work for your company and just expect, like, "Well, I'm paying them." It's like, I get that, but there needs to also be this fair trade of, like, if you are paying them fairly, that's a whole different thing, but on top of you paying them, it's also your responsibility to provide that environment where they can grow, where they can, be promoted from within, so that they wanna stay, that they're thriving, because when you have happy people, they're gonna wanna give their best. They're gonna want to put, the effort and energy in it, instead of just like, I'm just checking the boxes and I'm just ready to clock out. Like, that's, then you think about when I think about companies that are thriving, and just rapidly growing. Anytime I've studied these different companies, like the one thing that I saw in common was that the company owner and the people that were at the top, they really really made sure that they took care of the people. It was so important for them to create a culture where they knew that their people could thrive. They knew that if they can make it a place where, the people are happy, they were being, they were given a chance to, take ownership of their work or their projects and have and real valid input and be heard and have it follow through. Not just like, hey, put your stuff in the suggestion box and then nothing's done about it. Like if they could be heard, they felt valued. And whenever that, Zappos is one that comes to the top of my mind. When I studied how, when Tony Hsieh created Zappos and all that, it was just incredible. Like all the different things that they've done. And my cousin used to work there. So it's like incredible, like how they did that for their employees. And then people want to work there and people like put effort and they were happy. And so there was like this whole thing about everybody just, not just getting along, but there was this whole like feeling of like, I want to be here. I really love it. And not many people can say that about where they work. So, I challenge anybody that has a company to really ask yourself, like, what am I doing for my people? How am I really showing that I care about my people? Because if when you do that, good people will pay that forward and want to do their best for you.
Absolutely. And I think there's companies like Zappo, REI, there's like all these different companies that are taking into consideration, you know, here's what here's we're getting really focused on our message, our values, our priorities. And I think when they set the stage and the tone for that, then they're setting people up for, oh, I get them. I understand them. I have a connection with them. And that's where, as we're looking at companies and those mentoring within the companies, we're looking at exploring, our values, exploring those priorities, exploring where we can actually find common ground to begin with, right? And that common ground might be like, let's say for our AI, oh my gosh, I love doing outdoorsy things, right? So I'm working for a company where we're coming together because I enjoy doing A, B, or C, and these are the products that we're selling to people, right? Because they love it too. But what do you love about it? That's when we start breaking down, so we begin to understand each other better, right? And having these conversations. And when we talk about the different ways that we're communicating too, as mentors, think about how you're communicating, what has influenced your communication, and how are you imposing your values and beliefs onto others, where it might be either opening that conversation or shutting down that conversation, right? Because we all have an opportunity, whether or not we are 14 years old or we're 70 plus years old, we have an opportunity to share knowledge. And so once we get the ego out of the way and understand that we can do this together, but let's figure out a way to do this together where it's shared knowledge, where we're empathizing with others, where we want to actually hear what others have to say and learn from them, then we're creating a different culture. We're creating different environments where we're open to different points of view, different ways of learning, different ways of communicating, and also being clear and more clear with each other, saying, yeah, I might give you that quick, yeah, okay text, but that's because I might be busy, but it's nothing against you, right?
Right.
I just wanted to get that done. And so I will come back later. Or maybe you can tell them, hey, I would really appreciate you just, if I send you something, just recognizing, giving me a little bit of recognition for, and I don't mean like recognition, like you did a great job, but recognizing that, oh, okay, what I said and responding to that, right? Because then that'll give me a better idea of where you're at with the project or where you're at today or how you're even doing. Because some people might say, oh my gosh, that person didn't respond. Are they okay? So as we're talking about this, Jen, as we're closing, what's your nugget?
Oh, wait, hold on.
Okay.
Viviana
Okay.
mentioned some really good stuff. She said,
Okay, good.
I've
Good.
always been busy at work and I can't keep training people because people keep leaving because of how they are treated. Hello, listen, employers.
Yeah,
That's
right.
a way to burn out the most loyal people in your company. Oh my gosh, totally spot on, Bibiana. It's true. And that's the whole thing about, retention is just like, gosh, think about the people. It's like you're trying to do your job And now I gotta train somebody again outside of my, my regular work. It's like, yeah, it costs more time, it costs more money, and then it puts strain on the people who are just trying to, keep their regular task going, and then you're like, "Hey, we got a new person coming in again, and we have to train them." So that is annoying, and frustrating. And she said, "I worked for a company once that did wonderful things on national holidays, like the 4th. They brought in ice creams and catered lunch for everyone who had to work. It felt like they cared about us." Yeah, and it's those simple things. I mean, yeah, you hear about some companies like Google, and they have like, all these crazy things. Of course, if you're a big company, you have the budgets to do it. But, simple things that too. Like, I mean, I appreciate donuts. It's like, I mean, I want to raise, but I appreciate a box of donuts. It's like, it just shows, like you said, at what's important is what you said at the end. It's that it felt like they cared about us. So yeah,
And I
thank
think,
you for sharing that.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's important. But I also think getting down to very, yeah, the little things matter, right? The little things absolutely matter. But I think the big things too, when you're trying to construct your culture and what that looks like, what that feels like, and how you're opening up to a bigger community or developing a bigger community, what are you actually saying? What are you actually doing to set the stage for that as a company? And as mentors within, as leaders within, how are you setting the stage? How are you modeling that, right? It's not just words, it's not just theory, it's practice. So how are people seeing that you're practicing that as leaders? So your nugget. Thank you so much for all the great comments, and thank you for reading those, Jen. And thank you, Bibiana. So your nugget for today.
Um, yeah, I think a nugget would be a little bit of homework would be to, write down your assumptions of other people in your workplace. And pay attention to that, and then ask yourself, when, how am I allowing these assumptions to get in the way of me communicating more effectively with this other person? And how is it affecting my work? So I think it's like a simple reflection of, like, list down your assumptions that you have of people that you work with, and then ask yourself, how is this affecting my work, and how can I change this? So that's the nugget.
I love that. Thank you. I love how
You're
you send
welcome.
us away with homework.
Yeah, right.
Because it's so important, and we do need some personal self-reflection, as well as maybe as leaders, companies reflect reflection, right, of what we're doing. And so what I would say to kind of piggyback on that whole idea of, understanding your own assumptions, is understanding your own values, but also then asking others what their values are in relation to A, B, and C. So you understand and respect, you can begin to have an understanding or respect for the differences.
Right.
And that again is a conversation about respect and understanding and empathy that we can have regarding our differences, because even sometimes when people have a knowledge or an awareness of people's differences, they may not still connect. So we can have a conversation about that another time. But I love what you said about write down your assumptions. And I would say, to take it in a different direction, is understand your own values and understand the values of others, so that you can not make those assumptions. So, all right. With that said, thank you, everybody. I love today's conversation. Please invite your friends if you think somebody needs to hear this, or if a company that you're working for is, you're confused by them, or you're having trouble, within the culture. Maybe this is a video that you can refer them to as well. All right, everyone, take care, and we will see you next week. Are you ready to do this, Jen, and dance this out? Or, yeah, dance it out. Let's do this. All right. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye, everyone. Have a great week. Thank you.